Hello, this is Suzanne Wachtel, and I am going to talk today about mothers and daughters, mother-daughter relationships. Such a complicated topic. I guess I'm thinking more about my mother because it was a very complicated topic. And it's a rainy day here in Florida. You can hear my windshield wipers going side to side. As the rain comes onto my windshield, the wipers clear it off. And somewhat like a mother-daughter relationship, things come up and then they seem to get cleared off. Well, I will say, and I open my workshops with telling everybody that you would all be so jealous because I have a fantastic, healthy, loving, embracing relationship with my mother, and it's only been for the past 12 years. It's been amazing, really, and it's loving. There is healthy communication, and there's just all wonderful memories and good times. And I know you don't believe me, but the truth of the matter is she passed 12 years ago, and therefore I can just remember the wonderful times, the lessons I learned, and all of the wonderful things she taught me without having to hear the guilt, the criticism, the nagging, and all of the above that most of us experience in a relationship with our mothers. So there you have it. My mother was my first patient. She was badass crazy. Growing up, she was a single mother, and she was super eccentric. I think that back in the day, people called crazy people eccentric if they had a style or a certain je ne sais quoi. But she had all of that. She was an artist. She was a beatnik. Before hippies, there were beatniks. And she was, for sure, brilliant and a free spirit. So my mother left my father in Pittsburgh when I was 4, and off she dragged me to Europe to follow the living theater, to explore the world, to just schlep me along on her journey. I was a little kid, so for me, I just learned to be very adaptable. I learned languages. I learned to be friendly and meet people wherever I was. And I would say the lessons I learned, I had no idea I was learning until I became an adult. But I will say that going through Europe, meeting all kinds of interesting people, we ended up in Ibiza. Ibiza was is a little island in the Balearic Islands next to Mallorca. And in 1962, it was a beautiful little, lovely, natural Spanish island. And within that island was a community of expats. Expats are people that live abroad, but yet have like an international community. So my mother was single, kind of wild, and here I was, this little girl, and now having to go to school with the Spanish children and try to fit in. And not easy, but I did it. So my mother was a very interesting character. She was always in love with being young. She was always in love with being popular or famous. And she was just a character, a histrionic, meaning histrionic people are people that like to show off and wear low-cut things and just be very much visible in a crowd. It was not easy being the child of a mom like that. She was very open, very no filter whatsoever. And at times, it was really difficult being her daughter. It was embarrassing. She often took a dislike to some other moms or created some drama, and I was always fixing things or staying under the radar. So I think having a mother like that really did, the takeaway for me was that I learned how to navigate mental illness. without even knowing what that was. I learned how to walk on eggshells to survive. I learned how to get into feelings and try to understand, and then at times try to avoid. So my mother being very, very difficult. If she had a boyfriend, I could be in the other room and she wouldn't even notice I was there. If she didn't have a boyfriend, she needed me or wanted me to be her buddy, best friend, compadre, and used me for companionship. So it was a bit of a yo-yo. The lucky thing is I went to America every summer to see my grandparents, who were very normal people. And normal meaning healthy, grounded, stable, a nice married couple in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I would see my dad. But back to my mother, it was like living with a wild gypsy. Her form of coping was to keep moving. So yes, Ibiza became our home base, but I would say on average every 2 years she would find a new country where she thought it would be better. So off we would go, and I would start a new school, and I would try to fit in, and then I had my mother. You just couldn't hide her. Even when I tried to make her dress in a certain way to kind of conceal her very large chest and her flaming red hair, she just looked different. And as a little girl, you just want to fit in. So it was very challenging having a relationship with my mother. At one point, as I grew up and got married, and I had a family of my own, she would just show up. She would come from London and just pop in. I'm here. No arrival date, no destination time. And it was challenging because she was not the kind of mother that would sit there knitting and babysitting. She was the type that would rearrange my furniture, change my silverware drawer, take the liberty to yell and curse at my children to the point where it became intolerable. And then I had to make a decision. It was one thing for her to be difficult with me, but when she started really being difficult and inappropriate with my children, that's when I put my foot down and asked her to leave. And my husband and I agreed. We put her up in an apartment in the city, and she was super angry. But it was me, the kids, or her. And at that point in my life, at 40, I chose me and my kids. So going right along, my mom didn't speak to me for quite a while. She decided that I was a terrible daughter, even though I continued paying her rent and taking care of her. I was a terrible daughter, and therefore I should be punished by losing the privilege to speak to her. So a form of alienation. Now, that was when it affected me greatly, and I started to have anxiety and panic attacks. So I made a decision to put myself into therapy and really to understand the relationship with my mom, to really understand who she was and what was wrong with her and why she behaved the way she did. And that finally, for the first time in my life at 40, I began to really see and realize that it was not my fault, that she had mental disorders. I believe she had a mood disorder along with a myriad of personality disorders, which are really thinking disorders, such as borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder. And when people have that, I came to learn, they can't help it. It's like coming from a different country or a planet. They believe that is the right way to be. So I had no chance of discussing with her, going with her to therapy. When I did ask her, she would answer with, "Well, you're the crazy one. Why do I have to go?" And then I realized it was just a wasted effort. But I did go for 7 years, and I was in school to become a therapist because therapy helped me so much to resolve my issues and understand my family, myself, and not to take anything personally. I did go into intensive therapy and did the work on healing me, myself, and along with it, learned how to understand my mom and handle her. And then I learned that I needed to develop much, much stronger boundaries. Boundaries are rules. Boundaries are limits. Boundaries are going to be a whole other podcast. But I will say that once I depersonalized the relationship, understood that my mom had certain triggers and issues, I was able to be in somewhat of a healthy relationship with her and love her from a distance. So mother-daughter relationships can be wonderful. Sometimes if they're too wonderful, you become highly codependent, meaning you and your mother are so close that often it leaves no room for anyone else to come into your life. If a mother is single mother or has a not a healthy or great relationship with her partner, she may develop a strong bond with the daughter that ends up becoming a codependent relationship, which feels wonderful. But then if the mother, predeceases or the daughter, they're lost. So having boundaries, having your own idea of what a healthy relationship with a mother is, really figuring out what it is that you need from your mom, whether it's approval, love, or just to be in a relationship with a family member. Listen, there were many times at the end of my mother's life when I was devoted, I was her only child and devoted to taking care of her. And many people would say to me, why would you do that? She was so difficult. And I said, because that's who I am. She's my mother. I would help a stranger. So I will tell you one funny story. I collected all of her books. She was always in the magazines and papers. She was a famous psychic. At one point, she was a punk rock star. I mean, she was a comedian, Sadie Linsberger. She wrote books. She had a snake. She was quite a character. I'm really underplaying how big her personality was. But I'll never forget when I was 10 years old, we were in Ibiza, and she was talking as she always did, and I needed to ask her a question. I'm like, Mom! And she looked at me with vicious eyes and said, don't you ever call me Mom again. And wounded, I looked back at her and said, what should I call you? You're my mom. And her answer was clear as a bell to her. Just call me Renee, because that's my name, and I don't want people thinking I'm old to have a kid your age. Now, the funny irony of that story is that I was 10 and she was 30 at the time. And there are so many other stories. There's one more that I do want to share with you to give you an idea of the kind of character my mother was. And even so, I was able to tease out somewhat of a nice friendship with her. And I understood her on a level. It took a lot of time, effort, and money to figure out how she operated and how not to let her toxic behavior hurt me. And that was where the therapy about it came in. There is a book that really helped me during the time I was doing the work about my mother, and it was called Motherless Daughters. And that is for women who, as a young girl, your mother was either passed away or alcoholic or emotionally unavailable or mentally ill or whatever. She just could not be the mother that you needed her to be and love you the way you deserve and needed to be loved. So I highly recommend Motherless Daughters. You could probably order it on Amazon. And that was a helpful book. It just helped me to realize I was not the only one that was dealing with a very challenging mother-daughter relationship. And I was determined not to alienate her completely, because I did love her. I mean, it's still my mother, even though she was rough. I did not want to abandon her, in her life. Now, the last story I will tell you, she was married 5 or 6 times. I think we lost count. However, when I was 21, she was 41, and I lived in Manhattan, and I had just had a baby with my first husband, and she had married Jack. She was 41 and he was 24. And they met in Ibiza and they got married. And they came to New York to help me out with the baby when he was born. And it was quite interesting. After a few months, they decided to take a trip cross country. And by then I was fine with that. And they did. And one day, maybe 2 months later, I get a hysterical phone call from none other than Renee/mom, who was freaking out, telling me that Jack had been killed in a car crash. And he was off to visit his family in Texas, and he got killed in a crash, and she was beside herself, and she was a widow now, and she was going to go back to Ibiza. So I said, Mama, and could I come? I said, I'm nursing a baby. It's just not possible. Well, she was angry and upset and wore black for a year. And she was totally upset with me for not being more available for her at the time she became a widow. Okay, I understand. But let's fast forward. Fast forward 3 years. My phone rings. Hello? Is this Suzanne? I'm like, who is this? He said, Jack. I go, Jack? I thought you died. He goes, you believed her? I said, well, who would lie about such a thing? He said, listen, your mom and I had a big fight. We broke up. I'm getting remarried. I need to find her to get her to sign the papers so I could get married in 10 days. I said, absolutely. Here's her address. Here's her phone number. Enjoy. Good luck. Wishing you the best. And I was in shock. So now I decide to call my mother, Renee. Mom, hi. Hi, babe. What's doing? I just got a very interesting phone call. Oh, really? Who? You'll never believe it. Dead Jack. And you could hear the shock in her voice. What do you mean? I said, yeah, remember you made me feel bad for 2 years about dead Jack and how I didn't come, and you wore black and you told people great details about his death, and there was a dead silence. I said, how do you explain yourself? And this was her answer. In my mind, he was dead. And that was her belief. In her mind, he was dead. Therefore, she created the story and the belief and the myth that he died. Anyway, at the end of her life, he did call her, and they reminisced and had a closure and a full circle, and it was beautiful. But these are the types of things that I experienced with my mother. And I will say that I'm so grateful for the takeaway that I am not insane. I am grounded. I don't judge anyone. I don't shame anybody. I accept people as is. I try to understand them. And I think that having a mother that was really supposed to be my role model, and having her so dysfunctional, it really gave me that ability to be independent, self-sufficient, and know that I am a survivor and stronger because of it. And I am so grateful to her for the many things that she did that taught me that I did not want to do. I did not want to be mean. I did not want to be vulgar. I did not want to hurt people's feelings. I did not want to be that person. So, Mom, I love you and I always will. And I'm so grateful for all the lessons I learned from you. And and good and bad. And many of them were good, and some of them were pretty bad. But I'm always very grateful. But I will say, when people come to me in my practice that are having issues with their children or their parents, this has really given me the ability and the insight to help them with tools and insight and understanding of how to navigate a relationship with a mother that is difficult and challenging. Well, I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed a couple of the crazy, funny stories that I shared. And I look forward to your responses. Have a beautiful day. Bye.